Hi, my name is Carrie Morrow. Welcome back to another episode of my podcast, What the Heck Next? I spent 40 years of my life working in Hollywood, TV, film, producing. Literally, I was the physical producer of many productions you've heard of. Wedding Planner, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, Kevin Hart Show, many more. This week, we're going to talk about what happens when I get a call to produce, which has not happened in a long time till now. So please jump on in, listen. It's got some great Hollywood details, and I'll tell you all about what happens from my point of view as the physical producer of many big productions. Let's go. Here we are. Welcome back to another episode of my podcast, What the Heck Next? The name came out of necessity. I produced in Hollywood. I was a physical producer. When you see all those credits at the beginning of a show, I was the one that was called upon when they had the money, the star, the director, the script, and they're ready to go. I was the maker of the movie. That was my job. It hasn't happened for a long time. Since 2022. We've talked about this. Hollywood's made many changes. That's just what's happened in the evolution of film, TV, streamers, and buys and sells and mergers and everything else. Life has a way of changing our plans, the ones we never planned to change. So here I've sat for 4 long years with this complete shutdown. There were a few little projects being made, but guess what? Not in this country. Right? We've talked about this. I sat here after the strikes thinking it's coming back, and all my friends are like, oh, it's going to come back bigger. No, it did not. There I sat for year after year. However, obviously, if I've done this for 40 years, I'm not a kid. It's very hard to live with an empty plate, to wonder what happened to my career, because I wasn't fired. As I like to say, there's no HR department in Hollywood. You just don't hear from anybody. It's not like friends of mine who have been laid off and they go, I got the call. HR said, come on in and you've lost your job. I didn't get any call. I just didn't get any calls, which is what happens when you're a freelance employee. Your whole journey is based on calls. You get called to make productions. You get called to budget them, bid them, let the studio know what you think it'll cost, looking for incentives. Except now everything's left the country. And one of my followers actually said the other day, well, what do you think about this whole New Jersey thing? Here's what I think. In the 90s, it was Georgia. Everybody's going to Georgia. We're going to get to Georgia. We would march down Hollywood Boulevard with our signs, stop runaway production. Don't let them shoot out of California. Didn't do any good. They left. Studios like Marvel and Netflix and many studios went there, over to Georgia. And that's Georgia, United States, not Georgia, Russia. Lots of Hollywood people actually jumped on that bandwagon. I know people that moved to Louisiana because there was a lot of productions there, New Mexico, lots there, and many in Georgia. Off they went. And let me tell you something now, dried up. I heard an interesting fact the other day about Georgia, that now that it's dried up and Marvel has now moved to London, so all those giant projects that were made in Georgia now are shooting in London. Georgia has now published a fact that after all these decades of bringing productions there, all the billions of dollars they paid out in tax incentives, the state of Georgia made 19 cents on every dollar they paid out. It was a big flop, big waste of money. So when people tell me, oh, we're going to bring productions back to LA, really? I told you I took the California incentive, the California film incentive, and I put it directly, copy and paste into ChatGPT. It came back horrendous. That is a gross financial impact on the state of California. It may return 4,000 of the 60 to 100,000 jobs lost. It has a equality factor in it that deducts 4% if you don't have a majority of diversity hires. It does not include anything above the line. Now, above the line is actually a section of the budget which includes writers, directors, producers, and stars, and all the expenses that goes with them. Well, California is the only place that does not offer any incentive benefits from any of those expenses. Right, but every competing place, like Georgia and New Jersey and New York and all the other places, offered above the line. Well, California thought they didn't need to, and they've never included that. So this governor can sit and say, I've doubled the amount of funds available, but it doesn't matter because it's a waiting list and it's a lottery. It takes time. You also have to do these manipulating calculations called labor ratio. So you've got to show on paper that you're spending more money on humans than you are on stuff. But the cost of doing business in California is regulated, the unions, by the rates, the union rates. You want to rent a house in California for the day, it's near $25,000. So your cost of expenses are enormous. But in the budget, you have to submit, it can't be bigger than the labor. You have to have a ratio that shows almost 4-to-1 that you're spending more. Now, here's the problem. If you fabricate the budget, you manipulate the numbers so that it looks like on paper you've qualified for those ratios just to get the incentive. Afterwards, when they're doing this full audit of your production, you've defaulted on that math. They penalize you 10%. I sit here in California and I grew my career here in California. I would never say this is the best place to make your production. It is jumping through hoops, leapfrog and begging. I did a video short that said, how did everybody become an expert on nothing in Hollywood? There was this like ding-dong girl sitting there that maybe, I don't even think she was 30, which then qualified for really how much experience does she have in Hollywood? The real Hollywood that I'm talking about, the meat and potatoes Hollywood. And she's saying, oh, we're working on this to bring the permit fees down. Permits? You think that people aren't shooting in California because of the permits? By the way, she's trying to get permits in Los Angeles within what they call the zone, shooting within 30 miles of the way the crow flies from this location called the Beverly Center. She's sitting there running her mouth saying, well, we're going to get the permits down to $350. Well, guess what, sister? California offers a 5% bonus to not shoot in LA, to shoot outside of this zone. So productions are actually running up to Ventura County, which is outside of the zone, where you have to pay a stipend or you base your production office there. So you're allowed to shoot there and you have your production all shooting at locations far from where everybody lives in LA, way up in Ventura County, a whole other county. It's such a mess. This California really shot itself in the foot as far as I'm concerned. So I've sat here for 3 years, almost 4 years, waiting and thinking and believing, is my career over? Am I retired? Do I have to give up? Do I have to surrender? And I have friends that have moved away. I have a friend, a location manager who became a police officer in Maryland. I have a friend who moved to Boca. I have another friend who left the business altogether. I have my best friend who's now working at Nordstrom's Rack. It's been devastating. And then I have a few friends who like to call me up and go, oh my God, are you working? I mean, I'm not working. Okay, when was the last time you worked? Well, I actually worked all year. Okay, I haven't worked in almost 4 years. Don't call me up and cry, I'm not working at this moment. There is a select bunch that works. Some are minorities, and some just are hooked into a system in TV that keeps them working. Obviously, I am not one of those people. I kept wishing, I kept praying, I kept saying, I'm not done. I am not done. And not because I didn't want to retire and not because I didn't save up for retirement. I know that sounds strange. I've said this. I'm not quite sure what retirement looks like for me. People can say, oh, well, it means getting your Social Security. I still support children. My daughter's in college. My son is in sports. I don't want to stop working. None of that money is enough if I'm still supporting people. Okay. Now, do I have money saved up and am I ready to just run off to a 55 plus community? I want to keep working. I love to work. Then there was that fear that if I did get a call for a job, would I remember how to produce? Well, here's the answer. So in 2018-19, I was called by a studio to make a TV show, produce a TV show for a network. It was 10 episodes. The man who was calling me in 2018-19 was a guy that worked for me in 1996 on a movie in Utah called Clay Pigeons. He was working in locations. Now he was working as an executive at this big company. He remembered me. How flattered am I? Because I was a producer on the movie in 96. Here it was 20 years later. And he was saying, I worked with this great line producer. He called me up and he's like, do you remember me? Wow, that was a long time ago. So I went in and I interviewed and I got the job. And I ended up producing for a year on a TV show called Games People Play. It was a wild experience. It was not a giant budget. It was 10 episodes and 2 million an episode shooting here in LA, which is a tight squeeze for a 48-minute TV show. And not only that, I actually brought in my brother who directed many of those episodes. So it was a very successful show and it went on to get a season 2. Unfortunately, the star of the show had a severely tragic incident and decided not to go on to season 2, but we finished season 1 with that. Star was a success after that show. So here's how the mind works. I never heard from him again, and I never heard from that studio again. And in my mind, I thought, I guess they didn't like me, or they didn't love me, or they don't want to work with me anymore. And that's kind of how my mind works, is because I just think that if people like me, they'll just call me again and again. And they didn't. Now, that just means they either had projects that came to them with producers or there wasn't an opportunity for me. But look, if you wait long enough, here you go. About 2 months ago, I'm on Instagram. Pops up this man who was the executive back then at this company and said, oh my gosh, there you are. Like as if I had disappeared. There you are. I am now doing something else for a different group. I'm not with that company anymore, but I can't make this show without you. I'm going off to make a group of films. I would love for you to be a part of it. Let me tell you how that rang in my heart, because I do sometimes, regardless of the state of the industry, feel like, wow, maybe they don't want me or they don't love me anymore. Maybe that's just emotional, but that's how I think because I put my heart and soul and my passion into everything I do. So when I don't get a call, I take it personal. Yes, and we can sit here and say, it's just business, but to me, it's personal. I am on a project for a year, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That becomes my life, literally. The success of that project is personal to me. That show was personal. And my brother was on that show. By the way, the show got a second season and they went off to shoot it in Atlanta, Georgia, like we had mentioned earlier, not in LA. They went to Atlanta. And my brother directed 9 of the 10 episodes. So it was a really successful situation that I never heard from them again. But here he is. He pops up again. And he's like, oh my gosh, friend, where have you been? Here you are. I found you. When people say to me, what are you doing with all this social media? Like, where do you expect it to go? Guess what? If it got me one movie or a package of 4 or 5, winner, winner. Winner, winner. I am really excited that we reconnected. So over the past month, they hired me and paid me to do a budget. Now, I'm going to explain to you what my role is. So the director of this movie wrote the script. They sent me the script. I start with a full breakdown. So I take the script and I break it down into elements. The cast, what days do they work? How many days do they work? How many cars? How many locations? How many sets? How many days? How many nights? Based on what they're telling me they can afford to pay. So if their budget, this is not a big budget. This is in the tier 1 range with the union, which is under $6 million, $6 million. They're coming and asking me, what incentive do I think? We've talked about a lot of locations. We talked about Mexico, New Zealand, Puerto Rico, Utah, Miami. We've talked about a lot of things. I've done this entire thing and I've now submitted the budget, and I'm going to show you that this is what a budget, a top sheet looks like on a budget. I do the schedule, I do the whole breakdown, and we are starting to push towards answers. You see, my job is to answer their production package. I don't find the money for all of you who send me scripts, say, oh, are you interested in reading my script or listening to my pitch? That's not what I do. I put together an enormous package that's going to carry this production all the way to the movie theater. I divide it up into the sections. Like you can see, there's above the line, the production period, the post period, and then other expenses. Then at the bottom, there's an incentive line. So if you want to shoot in a place like Utah, which is a consideration for them, the state of Utah will give you back 20%, which is rather small if it answers their visuals, it makes sense for their visuals. Most of this script happens to take place interior. Their incentive really just needs to help them financially. Utah is only 20%, so most of the cast probably isn't going to come from Utah. The production will, all the people and all the expenses and the cost of shooting the movie will. But then they pick up and they go back to Los Angeles, so the below the line doesn't. The below the line works, but the post does not. The contingency does not. And things like music and writing and that stuff doesn't affect it. So then we've offered up places like Puerto Rico, Mexico City. Now, Mexico City is a different set of circumstances. I love Mexico City. I saw 10 there. I like it because it's really easy to shoot. It's complicated if you don't speak the language and speak the culture, which I do. I have offered that up to the director, but he brought up a concern, which is a valid concern, that in conversations he's had with agents, they are concerned that their clients in this climate, in this world, they're not going to go to Mexico. There is a basic fear over shooting in Mexico and being in Mexico. Even when I saw 10, the company that I was working with was petrified. They needed armed guards and they were afraid to walk in the street. And that's a valid concern for a lot of people. I did not have it. I lived in Mexico City for months, walked the streets. Even my 90-year-old mother would go to the Walmart down the street to pick something up. There was no concerns. We lived in a gorgeous area and had no problems. A lot of cast who've never been there are not interested in going to Mexico City for their own personal safety concerns. And by the way, they may not be concerned, but maybe they have a spouse or an agent who don't want them to go. Puerto Rico is another great option. By the way, it's my number 1 option. Why? Because it has an enormous incentive. Now, in conversations that we've had, we were just told that maybe that Hurricane Maria did a lot of damage to the infrastructure and getting around is difficult. But this movie has limited locations and 10 of the 20 days are in one place, in one mansion. So infrastructure isn't going to really hurt us. We're kind of sitting still. That makes it pretty easy to make that movie happen. It's also US. There's no customs, there's no passports, there's no problems. I love Puerto Rico. I was on a movie called The Losers there for Warner Brothers and Joel Silver. I thought I died and went to occupational heaven. It was the greatest choice. People I worked for didn't like the choice. They didn't like Puerto Rico. Joel liked Puerto Rico. The other producer was not happy. But it was it was a great success, and it was a good location. So I'm waiting to see what they're going to decide. I submitted this budget to them today, and it's preliminary. So we call it V1, version 1, and it's really just a launching place where we're going to establish crew rates at the tier 1 level. We can change the incentive at any time. We can change what we're paying the cast. That's negotiable, right? If you're a celebrity and what they're willing to put up for that person. And sometimes, which comes first, the chicken or the egg, the celebrity or the fee? Celebrities sometimes drive that number with their popularity and their ability to sell a movie. Sometimes the budget drives it, and you have to go out convincing them to work at that rate. Here I sit in the middle of all this thinking, I wished for this. I wanted this more than anything. I did not want to stop working. Here as I sat here for a month and I thought, oh my gosh, what if I don't remember how to do this? And what if the software I work with is very complicated if you don't know it? The budgeting software is called Movie Magic Budgeting. Scheduling software is called Movie Magic Scheduling. And both serve to create this package that will become the boilerplate for this production. Now, the great thing is that I worked with it. The crazy thing is that this company is now out of business, and yet it is the software that us old school people use. That's all we know is this software. This is what we use. I got through it and there were no issues. I'm really, really proud of the budget and schedule that I delivered to them today. Like I said, preliminary. The most important part, obviously, is that a movie comes out of this and I'm attached to it because I am going to produce again and you guys are going to be there and you're going to be with me while I do it. So the moral of the story is when the whole world just said this is over and this is washed up, and I did say it, rest in peace, Hollywood, not rest in peace, me. I am not done. I will do this. I will take this job. I'm excited that I'm a part of people who remembered me, saw me as great. It's really been fun having conversations with them and talking to them about my experience and telling my stories. The director is this just lovely young guy. The other producer is somebody I know now for 25 years. It's just crazy, maybe more. 30 years. It's just crazy. I am grateful that somebody did call me, remembered me. I'm more grateful that I had the integrity, courage, and perseverance to not give up hope that I was not done producing, because I'm not. But I'll tell you where I'm different. I used to get phone calls for jobs, and the first thing I'd think of is, oh, I got to call this one and this one and this one. I'm going to take this person with me and this person. I'm not that person anymore. I'm just making my movie. I am taking me, and I will hire the best, not best friends. Those people have all just evaporated. I did a post this week that said, what happens to people when they don't need you anymore? What happens to those people that I spent a lifetime giving jobs to? What happens? Nothing happens. They stop calling because there's no work from me. Guess what? She back. She gonna do it again. You watch. I'm really excited that you guys are here with me. I thank the universe and everything for delivering me this opportunity. It's a knock at the door, and I opened, and it was there on the other side. I wanted this. It's going to be a lot of fun, and it may take months to get it off the ground. But if it's not this, they also have another movie that they're interested in. I am so excited to be invited to the table. So I want to thank you for coming to my table every week. What the heck next? Life has a way of changing these plans, the ones we didn't plan to change. Thank God I didn't plan to retire. And I am really grateful. Please like, follow, subscribe, tell other people, and listen to me every week. I'm going to take you with me on my next adventure. I'm super grateful. Find me on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Every day I post on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And you get to get a piece of my mouth and my thoughts every single day. Have a great, great week. And remember, great things happen when you shoot the puck. Best advice.